I am Dr. Giridhar and I would be making a presentation on macular hole surgery. It was exactly around 25 years ago that Kelly and Windle performed the first surgical procedure that resulted in a closure of a macular hole. They performed vitrectomy with induction of a posterior vitreous detachment and a gas tamponade using sulfur hexafluoride gas. This resulted in closure on macular holes in nearly 50% of the cases that they operated. This was indeed a landmark as far as the management of macular holes was concerned, because till then we did not have any form of treatment for this particular clinical condition. Subsequently, during the last 10 to 15 years, there has been 2 or 3 significant developments, both in the surgical technique and in the understanding of the anatomy of macular holes, that has resulted in improvement in outcomes of macular hole surgery. First is the internal limiting membrane peeling, demonstrated by Eckart in the year 1997, that substantially improved outcomes of surgery, and subsequently the development of optical coherence tomography. With spectral domain tomography, which we use nowadays, we are able to understand the structure and the anatomy and also the size and topography of the macular holes very well, and this definitely helps us in selecting patients for macular hole surgery. There are again 2 important developments in the surgical technique: the development of micro-incisional vitreous surgery using the 23, 25 and more recently the 27 gauge instrumentation has definitely improved outcomes of macular hole surgery. Moreover, the surgical procedure has become more atraumatic and patients are able to be mobile much earlier than what we used to have with the 20 gauge vitrectomy instrumentation. What are the predictive factors for better outcomes in macular surgery? This is very important because it's not correct to operate on all patients with macular holes, because we want better outcomes, better surgical outcomes, both in terms of the anatomical closure and also in visual improvement. For this, the case selection is very important. The surgical technique is equally important, and what sort of post-operative care that we need to give to these patients, especially in the immediate post-operative period. So coming to the case selection, there are 2 or 3 important factors as far as case selection is concerned. One is the size of the hole, second is the duration of the hole, and third is the configuration of the hole in OCT. If the preoperative visual acuity is less than 20 by 200, that is, if a patient has got only a counting finger vision, usually such patients do not show any substantial visual improvement following surgery. The size of the hole is very important. The smaller the size of the hole, the better the anatomical outcome. If the size of the hole is less than 400 microns, nearly 100% of the patients usually show anatomical closure. This is again very important because you can tell your patients based on the OCT and the size of the macular hole the percentage chance of a anatomical closure following surgery. As the size of the hole increases, the percentage chances of anatomical closure correspondingly decreases. So if you have a holes more than 500 to 1000 micron, about 70 to 75% of these cases show closure after surgery. Another important point as far as the outcomes are concerned is the type of closure. That is, even after a proper closure for macular hole, sometimes the visual improvement is not very good. And this is primarily because the outer layers of the retina have not fully developed. Now, if you look at this particular slide, where I'm showing you a patient who has had a successful macular hole closure, immediately after surgery, if you see, the ellipsoid layer has not yet formed, but the external limiting membrane is faintly seen. And if you see the serial follow-up of this particular patient, over a period of 3 months, the ellipsoid layer has completely formed and the external limiting membrane is very well seen. So once you get this sort of a closure where all the layers are present, and especially when the outer retinal bands are fully formed, the visual improvement will be very significant. We did a small study trying to correlate the preoperative microstructural features and postoperative anatomical outcome and functional outcomes using SD-OCT in macular hole surgery. This was a series of 71 eyes of 71 patients. We measured all the indices because, as far as, if someone asks you a question, or if a patient asks you a question as to, look here, what are the chances of closure as far as my macular hole is concerned, there have been a lot of studies which have tried to assess the closure rate in relationship with the macular hole height, with the base diameter, with the minimum linear diameter, with the macular hole index, the hole form factor, etc. So we made all the measurements. So if you look here, this is what we call as the base diameter. This is what we call as the MLD, mean linear diameter. This is the inner hole diameter. This is the vertical height of the macular hole. So all these things are very important. And the presence of these cystoid changes within the edges at the two arms of the macular hole is very important, because once you have this sort of a cystoid change and a significant vertical height, usually these sort of eyes, macular holes, show a better anatomical closure. On the other hand, if you have a macular hole where the two edges are totally collapsed with hardly any cystoid changes, the chances of macular hole closure is far less. This again is a very important point. So in this particular study, we found that the macular hole closure was seen in about 63 patients, that is about 88.7% of the cases. And we tried to correlate the various indices that I had already mentioned earlier with the chances of macular hole closure, and also measured the p-value. And we found that the base diameter and the minimum linear diameter, which I had already explained to you, was statistically significant. Therefore, we felt that these are the two measurements which are important as far as if you want to really decide on selection of patients for macular hole surgery. Also, we tried to correlate between ELM restoration versus the macular hole indices, and we found that the macular hole index, MHI, was statistically significant as far as the presence of ELM is concerned. Therefore, probably as far as the macular hole closure is concerned, the minimum linear diameter and the base diameter is important. And as far as the restoration of the external limiting membrane is concerned, which is again got very important, because once you get an ELM restoration, visual acuity improvement is significant, and that correlates to the macular hole index. Therefore, summarizing our study, external limiting membrane was restored in 62 of the 63 cases where anatomical closure was achieved, and this had a significant correlation with the macular hole index. What are the surgical steps in macular hole surgery? The surgical steps are a triamcinolone assisted vitrectomy. That's my usual procedure. I do a phaco-vitrectomy when I find there is either a significant cataract that is acting as an impediment to proper visualization of the vitreous cavity for performing a good surgical procedure, or I find a cataract which I feel is reasonably significant and may progress very fast following macular hole surgery, thereby the patient requiring another surgical intervention in the form of cataract surgery in the immediate post-operative period. So these are two situations where I do a phaco, I advise the patient a phaco-vitrectomy. Use a wide-angle viewing system as far as the vitrectomy is concerned. ILM peeling I do with a brilliant blue green stain, brilliant blue stain, and of course the gas fill. So let us look at the surgical steps of macular hole surgery. So I perform nowadays only 25 gauge vitrectomy, and you can see the first step is a co-vitrectomy, where I do what is known as a debulking the vitreous. I just do a debulking of the vitreous, and subsequently I inject triamcinolone into the vitreous cavity. And triamcinolone is a very useful adjuvant, especially in any form of a clear vitreous surgery. And it forms a sheet on the posterior hyaloid, and it facilitates posterior vitreous detachment. Now this is how I'm demonstrating to you posterior vitreous detachment. You can see here I use the cutter and the suction, full suction, and then I drag the vitreous along the posterior pole in the upper quadrant. I don't drag it in the to the temporal side, and thereby induce a posterior vitreous detachment. And this is a very important step in the surgical procedure for macular holes. I would also like to show you the another important role of the triamcinolone. See, the triamcinolone identifies the premacular vitreous cortex. Now what I am removing now is the premacular vitreous cortex, which is a sheet on the posterior pole. And the most important step in macular hole surgery is that all the vitreous in the posterior pole has to be removed. So the triamcinolone really facilitates that. So once the vitrectomy is completed and the PVD has been induced, the next stage is staining. Now I usually do the staining under air. So I do what is known as a fluid air exchange, where I replace the liquid from the vitreous cavity with air. Now you can see on the right side is an extrusion cannula which is aspirating the liquid, and from the infusion side you're getting the air that is filling the vitreous cavity. So you can see here the liquid has been completely removed, and now the eye is filled with air, and subsequently I just inject just 1 or 2 drops of the dye. This is the brilliant blue. Just 1 or 2 drops that sits on the macula. Now the advantage of this technique is that you're using very little of the dye. Second thing is you leave the dye a very little time on the surface of the retina, because since this is acting as a tamponade, the air is acting as a tamponade, the staining is very fast. So once you have waited for about 30 seconds to say a little less than a minute, then you remove off the dye. And once that step is over, the next step is the most important step in surgery, that is the internal limiting membrane peeling. What are the essential requisites for a good ILM peeling? 1, you need a good high magnification. 2, you need a clear media. This is very important, because when you do a combined surgery like a phaco-vitrectomy, sometimes the cornea becomes a little edematous by the time you reach the ILM peeling, and this can act as an impediment to good visualization. I don't use a wide angle device, I use a contact lens, and nowadays I'm using the Chelum lens. That is very nice. It just sits, you just have to place it on the surface of the cornea. It has got, it's got a something like a tripod, which, helps you to just place it on the surface of the cornea. And then you need good instrumentation. So once you have done that, you will proceed with the internal limiting membrane. I use the pinch and peel technique. And this is something like a capsulorhexis. So you can see here, I hold on to one edge, just like a capsulorhexis, I bring it around, and then I release it, go to the edge closer to the retina, and then again go around, again release it, and again go to the edge, and then slowly drag the ILM and complete the ILM peeling 360 degrees. A nice rhexis. I made a very good rhexis, and this should be sufficient. Now there are a lot of questions asked about how much of ILM to remove. We have done a study to see whether increase in the size of the ILM results in better anatomical closure. The most important step in the ILM peeling is that the ILM should be removed from the edge of the macular hole. And a size of the ILM which I have demonstrated here is more than enough as far as an ILM peel is concerned. Now another important question that is asked is, where do we start ILM peeling? Now the ILM peeling should be started not this far. Here you see in this particular case, the ILM peeling is being started very far from the edge of the macular hole, and this is a very vascular area. And when you start the ILM in such a vascular area, there is a very high tendency for bleeding, and this is very risky. And not only that, the ILM is less adherent to the retina in this particular area, in the immediate perifoveal area. But as you go further away, the ILM is actually more adherent to the retina, and you may find it difficult to initiate ILM peeling. So again, continuing with this procedure here, you can see here finally you get a bit of the ILM, and then I proceed with the ILM peeling. I'm struggling to do the ILM peeling mainly because I have started the peeling at a wrong area. And the reason why I have started so far is, if you see here, my staining is also not very good. Therefore, I am really not able to visualize the ILM very well. Therefore, if your staining also should not be excess, but at the same time your staining should be reasonably good, so that you are able to identify the internal limiting membrane. So proceeding again with the ILM peel in this particular case, you can see here finally I have managed to get a bit of the ILM there, and I proceed with the ILM peel in a similar way. You can see here I go to the temporal edge, and then again go around, again come back and hold it at the same edge here at the temporal edge at the periphery of the peeled area, and then drag it around and complete the rhexis. So this is the technique of internal limiting membrane peeling. Now in slightly larger holes, or if your first rhexis is small, you can enlarge it. You can do what is known as a second peel. I do what is known as a second row of peel by holding on to the edge of the previous peel and then just going around once more and creating a little larger area of ILM peel. What are the complications of internal limiting membrane peeling? One is possibility of bleeding. You can see here again, actually I already done the ILM peeling. I am trying to do a little bit more, and there you are. As I told you here, once you go more farther away, you have these blood vessels, and you have went and tampered with this one blood vessel, and there is an oozing. There is nothing to worry. This may stop spontaneously, or in case it doesn't stop spontaneously, you can just do a FAE and give a little bit of a tamponade for a few minutes, and this bleeding will automatically stop. So this is again another small clipping to show you that sometimes you do not get a proper rhexis initially, so you get a small bit of the internal limiting membrane here, and now ideally I should be holding the ILM somewhere here, and instead of holding it somewhere here, I am holding it far away, closer to the major blood vessel, and again I get a little bit of bleeding. Another technique of ILM peeling which many persons use, I do not know whether they use it nowadays, is the scraper. This is the Tanno scraper which we used earlier to perform to get a bit of the ILM like that. And sometimes the Tanno scraper, you just see here, you keep rubbing and finally actually you damage the surface of the retina. You cause a lot of trauma to the retina, and this can result in poor visual outcomes, because when you do a post-operative OCT after surgery, you can see a lot of wrinkling of the retina in all these areas. So you can see here oozing, etc. So this is basically when you start doing macular hole surgery, sometimes you are struggling to get a bit of the ILM lifted up, and you end up creating a lot of trauma. So I've completely stopped using the scraper as far as the ILM peel is concerned, and I use only the pinch and peel technique. Once you have done the internal limiting membrane peel, The next step in surgery is to see whether you have completely removed the peripheral vitreous cortex. And if you have also done that, then you do a peripheral retinal examination before you do a gas fill, just to see whether there are any retinal breaks or small retinal horseshoe tears, etc. Because once you do a PVD induction, it's possible that there may be a firm attachment to the vitreous in the vitreous base, and you might have created an inadvertent break, and unless you look into the peripheral retina, you may miss such breaks. So it is very important that at this stage, after internal limiting membrane peel and before you do a fluid air exchange and a gas fill, to just examine the peripheral retina. So how to achieve good gas fill? Because in my experience, and also if you really read the literature very carefully, what is not more important is a good gas fill. It's not the type of gas that you inject, that is whether it's a sulfur hexafluoride, whether it is C3F8 or air. I'll come to that later. But then the gas fill should be good. It should fill the vitreous cavity. So this is why do you need a good gas fill? Because basically the gas bubble provides an interface over which the glial cells proliferate. So this is very important. So what we need is a dry macula during the first 48 to 72 hours. So during the first 48 to 72 hours, if the macula is dry, the glial cells proliferate and the macular hole closes. So this is very important, and you should need to make sure that this happens. And that is why you need a little bit of a prone positioning during the first 24 to 48 hours, so that the dry macula is maintained. A dry macula is critical in the early post-operative period to seal the edge of the macular hole and allow smooth glial cell migration. So how does macular hole close after surgery? Actually, in a novel technique demonstrated by Eckart, which was published a couple of years ago, what he did was he performed OCT on day 1 after surgery. That is, he managed to design the OCT with the manufacturer in such a way that he could perform the OCT in these cases immediately after surgery on day 1, day 2 and day 3. And he found that on day 1, 24 out of the 48 eyes showed macular hole surgery. By day 2, 36 had closed, and day 3, 43 had closed. And the 5 eyes which did not close on day 3 actually did not close at all. So macular hole closure occurs during the first 3 to 4 days after surgery. This again is very important. It's not that it happens 15 days or 20 days later. This is most often. There may be always 1 or 2 cases here and there where there may be a delayed closure. But most often macular hole closure occurs within the first 3 days or 4 days after the surgical intervention, and that is why any form of positioning is only critical during that period. It's not necessary to keep the patients prone for days together and and create so much of difficulties for the patient. So what do? So I usually do a fluid air exchange. And after performing a fluid air exchange, I completely dry the surface of the retina, and then subsequently I just wait for 3 minutes. And then subsequently I do what is known as a re-FAE, that is remaining fluid. Once you wait for 2-3 minutes, and then when you go in, you see so much of fluid there. You can see here, I'm just removing that fluid using active extrusion by extrusion. And you can see there's so much of fluid that has collected there within the 3 minutes. So this is all the peripheral fluid that moves to the posterior pole, and this I feel is an important step. And then not in all cases, I never do this technique, that is removing the fluid from the site of the macular hole. In slightly larger holes I do it. I don't touch the edges of the hole. I just go very close to the macular hole, and the fluid is just comes into the silicone tipped flute, And I feel this is a very important step, because if the hole is going to close, it just contracts. So when you see a decrease in the size of the hole when you do this particular step, that's a very good indicator that the macular hole is going to close. So this again is an important step. Now many persons ask me that don't you damage the edge of the hole at all, etc. But then I'm careful. I don't really go and touch the hole, and I don't do this for small macular holes, because in small macular holes there's no need to do such techniques at all. You just need to dry the surface of the retina and it will work. The next important question that is asked is face down position necessary? Now this again, if you go into the literature, there are so many recent articles: a macular hole closure without face down position, macular hole closure, patients just having a sitting position, etc., etc. Now, as I told you, the most important aspect as far as the macular hole closure is concerned after surgery is to keep a dry macula, and that's why you need the air or the gas inside the eye. So once you have the gas bubble and the interface between the gas and the retina is dry during the first 2 to 3 days, definitely the macular hole closure will occur. Now the importance of face down positioning occurs because of in eyes where the holes are reasonably large. Now if you're operating on a very small hole, like say 250 microns or 300 microns, probably these are eye patients where even if you have them face down for 24 hours it may close, or probably even less than that. But then if you are operating in our situation in India, most of the eyes that we operate are reasonably not very small holes, but reasonably large holes, and that is where the importance of face down positioning becomes very, very necessary, because you keep the macula dry during the first few days. The most important thing that we need to tell the patient that in the first 3 to 4 days they should not lie in a supine position. That is, night when they go to sleep, lie on any one side, either to the left or to the right, and never lie supine, because once you lie supine, the bubble comes up and fluid goes below, and therefore your macula will never be dry. And I feel this is a very important point, and this is one thing which I advise all my patients after macular hole surgery, that it may not be really necessary that you should always be prone or on your face down position, but at least avoid a supine position. So my advice to my patients is that face down positioning during the day, 45 minutes you face down, 15 minutes you take rest, you walk, you do anything else. During the day you perform that sort of a duty. Night when you sleep you lie on one side, and do this face down positioning during the day for about 3 to 4 days. That should be sufficient. So another important thing which I want to tell you is the possibility of doing an OCT on the first day after surgery. Now this is possible in pseudophakic eyes. Now this is a patient, you can see the pre-operative macular hole photograph, and day 1 through the gas bubble we have done the OCT, and you can see here the macular hole is closed. So if you are able to demonstrate this on day 1, then you can boldly tell your patient, look here, you have to lie prone only probably for another 1 day. That should be more than enough. You don't have to really lie on a prone position or a face down position longer than that. So this is another method that you can use, what I call as the OCT guided FDP, face down positioning, and this is possible in pseudophakic eyes using the SD-OCT. Another important question that is asked is, what do I inject? Should I inject SF6? Should I inject C3F8 gas, or should I inject air? Now, in my patients nowadays, practically I inject only SF6 gas. I very, very rarely inject C3F8, except probably in reasonably large macular holes. When I say large, I mean greater than 1000 microns in diameter. So only in such cases I think of using a long-acting tamponade, but otherwise universally SF6 is enough. And why is it enough? Because as I explained to you earlier, the first 3 to 4 days are critical, and SF6 gives you enough tamponade during the first 3-4 days, and this should be sufficient. The advantage, we did a study comparing these two gases together, and we found that, if you see here, if size wise we compared SF6 and C3F8, you can see here 27 of 29 eyes in group SF6, and in group 2 97% and 93%. So in less than 400 microns, and greater than 400 micron it was more or less the same. So there was nothing very significantly different in the closure rates between the we also analyzed between the duration, etc. But then SF6 gas is comparative in its effect to C3F8 irrespective of the size, stage and duration of macular hole, and should be the preferred agent for endotamponade. You can use air also as a tamponade, especially in very small macular holes. They don't need an SF6 gas, but otherwise universally SF6 gas should be sufficient as an effective endotamponade after macular hole surgery. So in summary, what are the important points? One is the case selection. As I told you, do not operate on macular holes which are very long standing, like 1 year, 2 years, etc. They are really not going to result in visual improvement. You may be able to achieve anatomical closure. You need to do an atraumatic internal limiting membrane peel, and for that I explained to you the techniques. You must remove the ILM from the edge of the macular hole. You must achieve a dry macula by doing a proper FAE, and also repeat the FAE after another 2 to 3 minutes. You can do a titrated face down positioning, especially if you are able to do an OCT in immediate post-operative period, and most importantly avoid a supine position. Thank you.